Hello, and welcome to episode 17 of That 60s Recording Podcast, the podcast that has conversations inspired by the golden era of recording. So we're approaching Christmas here, and lockdown has finally lifted, or some form of lockdown has finally lifted. I hope that you enjoyed the last episode with Jerry Hammack talking about his book, which is the Beatles Recording Reference Manual, Volume 5. And we have more from that conversation coming up today. And before we dive in, I just want to... I do say this a lot, but the podcast just keeps growing. I use Podbean to distribute this podcast, and the percentage increase of listeners is growing every episode, and it just absolutely astounds me. I didn't think for a second that I would have this many. I thought it would be good if I had 50 listeners per podcast, but we're well over 500 in every 2 weeks. I'm getting that brand new amount of not brand new amount of listeners, but the brand new listens to each podcast. So yeah, I really appreciate you all supporting me. Well, you're not supporting me. I really all appreciate you listening to this podcast, and please keep spreading the word and sharing it. And if you're enjoying it, please take the time to leave a review. You don't have to write anything. You just put 5-star review or whatever you want on iTunes. Don't think you can do it on Spotify. But every little helps. Every little thing like that helps grow the podcast and hopefully spread the word about what we're trying to do here. Okay, so we'll get back into this conversation. Here we go. Jerry Hammack, part 2. I'd love to speak a bit about your sort of research process into this kind of stuff, and how, well, first of all, your research process must have differed as you've gone on, but how did it change from this modern era that we've just been discussing, say modern era, the later era of Beatles work, compared to the sort of very early recordings when they were just on 4-track?
Well, the 4-track work is much easier to decipher. It's much easier to understand what how the songs were coming together. The songs were very were more basic pop tunes. They were the arrangements were more compact. The recording technology easier to understand, and the documentation was pretty complete. So that helped a lot. To be able to pull the puzzle pieces together. The entire process involved, first it involved understanding the studios. So what did EMI studios look like in any 1 year of work? Had they introduced new gear? So what was the gear going into 1964 that was in the studio? And then, was any of that gear exclusive to any one studio, in any one of the rooms in the studio? So in the case of consoles, that's the case. There was a Red 37 board in Studio 1 and Red 51 boards in Studio 2 and 3. So those are different consoles, and they behave differently, What kind of outboard gear was in play? When did it come into the studio? When was it accessible? When did we know that the engineers started to employ it on Beatles sessions? So that was the first thing to understand, was the how any of these studios was put together, and how the rooms were used. With EMI, they had a Siemens patch-based system, so they could, if they chose to, access gear from all over the complex. But typically, they kind of made do with what was in the rooms. In any one room, they would get, as they were setting up for a session, the engineers would call for, I need an I need the Alltech compressors, and I need a Fairchild limiter, and I want the pop filter plugged into the console. I want an RS-127, and give me an 8K, external EQ. So they'd specify that for a particular session. So again, if you understood how the room was put together, that was the first step. The next step was, how the engineer assigned to the session worked with any particular recording. What was their preferences? Norman Smith, when the earliest lead engineer called a balance engineer for the Beatles, for the early recordings for the Please Please Me and with the Beatles, his recording technique was to in order to get differentiation, which is difficult in mono. If your listeners know the difference between a mono recording and stereo recording, with a mono recording, all the sound's coming from one point, and the only thing you've got to play with psychoacoustically is depth. Is the only thing. You don't have width to play with. You only have depth, because everything's coming from one direction. Mm-hmm. So in order to differentiate for the purpose of depth, what he did was he used different microphone types for the cabinets. And they had slightly different EQ curves. A darker EQ is going to make something sound like it's a little bit further away. So that way you could place one guitar that's a little bit sharper sounds like it's a little bit more forward. A little darker guitar sounds like it's a little bit further back. All of a sudden, I've created depth in that. Mm. That was one of his techniques that he used. The other thing that he did to gain a live sound was he didn't use any what are called gobos or baffles between guitar cabinets. So everything was very live in the room. You're getting a lot of mic bleed. The last thing that he did was he used a U47 Neumann U47 microphone in omni position as a room microphone. So he would bleed actually, the sound of the band in the room playing together. Put those three components together and you have what turns out to be a very live recording. So when Norman Smith is engineering a recording, you know that now I'm going to have different mics on the guitar cabinets, and the microphone selections back then, you knew for guitar that they were using the modified U47s there were U48s, or U47s they had modified to U48 patterns. They were using Neumann KM54s and KM56s. Those were their kind of go-to cabinet microphones. So those are in play. I know I've got a U48 or a U47 in Omni in the room. Again, I know the engineer. I know his mic preferences. That tells me how the session was recorded.
Fantastic. It's you're intimately getting to know the styles of each of the personnel involved in every session.
Yeah. As you move to Emmerich as an engineer, now he's learned everything he could learn from Norman Smith. For a while, he just mimics Norman Smith's work, but then he starts adding more microphones to the drum kit. In Pepper, he starts miking under the kit. Come the White Album, he starts doing above and below snare microphones. Come Abbey Road, he's got 7 tracks going to the console of drums. So, so that's the second step, is who's the balance engineer and what are their preferences in working with gear. Ken Scott loved the U67s. So bass recording under Ken Scott's going to use a U67. Bass recording under Emmerich is going to use a AKG C12. So, and all of these things make a difference to the tone.
Yes. Yeah.
Do they like direct injection? Don't they like direct injection? That's the next level of understanding it. Then there is what format are they working on? Mono, twin track, 4-track, 8-track. Understanding that, now there is going to be an allocation of performances that has to happen in order for you to get to the back end stereo recording you hear. So a lot of my detective work ended up being taking the needle drop stereo masters, so era specific. I'm not talking, so none of the of the Giles Martin stuff that's modern, but versions that were contemporary with the Beatles. The 1967 stereo release of Pepper, and using that and then backing into the finished recording from any sort of evidence I had from audio takes of what happened. And I would know that they recorded the backing track on day one, and it takes tracks 1, 2, and 3, and then they added an overdub of, let's say, bass, because McCartney liked to record his bass on his own. Now that 4 tracks full, and I see by Barrett's notes and Lewison's notes that there was a tape reduction remix that was made. So now I collapse those. But do I collapse them to 1 track and have 3 open tracks, or 2 tracks and only have 2 open tracks? So I go back to the stereo. Are the elements that I heard, that I know are in the backing track, are they only in one place of the pan, or are they in 2 different places? That tells me something.
Yeah.
So, that's the detective work that goes into it too, either additively or subtractively, to figure out what was done in what order and how it came together to the final mixes that we hear.
I absolutely love it. It's so fascinating hearing you talking about it. And so when you look at the books, they're so intricately detailed that you know it's fun to hear you demystify the process slightly. And and now I'm just in awe of the amount of work that you've put into. I mean, I obviously knew that they would have had a huge amount of work, but it's amazing. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, there's no real mystery to it, and anybody that gets the books, you'll see that I completely explain my methodology. I'm not hiding. There's no great and powerful Oz behind the curtain anywhere. It's the way that I did the work. I try to explain completely what my rationale is, what my filters were, and frankly, I try to make very plain that if I don't know, I'm going to tell you. If I don't know how it was done, and there isn't information that would pass, what I would call reasonable academic rigor, that you can trust that this is true, then I'm going to tell you we don't know. I'll tell you what the suppositions are. I'll tell you what people believe happened, but I'm not going to say, and this is what happened, unless I know that that's what happened.
Yes.
And that goes for the recording techniques. It goes for who played what on things. One of the criticisms I had from the book is where I don't tell people in a number of instances, like, who played the lead guitar part on some of the early stuff. Was that John or was that George? And in a lot of cases, we you just don't know. We know that there was a solo played. Some people contend that Lennon had made a statement that if it's a Chuck Berry song, I played the solo. Except Roll Over Beethoven, did he play the solo?
Yeah.
And so unless there is evidence that we know of, and the evidence can come from other places, like Lennon does play the lead guitar lines for "I Feel Fine." That boom ba ba da bum 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 ba da ba dum bum. That's Lennon.
Yeah.
Playing it, and we know that not only because Lennon told us it, but there's live performance footage of him playing those lines.
Yes. Yeah.
And he's not going to learn them to play them live. It's just not in the way the guy was cut.
No.
So again, I really try to. I've really tried to make very plain what my filtering process was to come to the conclusions that I've come to in the books. So nothing's hidden. The books have full bibliographies. Every external source that I reference to come to my conclusions and bring these stories together is there. You can go down the same rabbit hole if you want to. And if you go down that rabbit hole and you find a different conclusion, let me know. Let me know. I'd like to hear it.
How well documented were the sessions at the time? Sort of spanning the whole of the sort of recording era. I know from my experience at modern day EMI, they even now take fairly rigorous notes on the equipment that's being used, and the engineers still do need to request certain things to be in play for a session. I perhaps in my naivety, I imagine that they were very well documented at the beginning of the recording career, and then as they began, the sessions got longer, perhaps more chaotic. It got more difficult to document what was happening.
Well, specifically, what happened is a little bit harder to document than what the setups were. So, as you noted, the practice at EMI was, and apparently still is, to a degree, that the engineer on the session has to make a request to the studio for the kind of gear that they want. And in the case of the Beatles, there was what was called a recording sheet was generated for each session. So before the session, it would be, I need 2 4-tracks available. I need these microphones in this place. So they had a little diagram in the recording sheet, which was a form that they filled out. And there would be a diagram, and they would show the setup of the room. I want, a U67 here. I want a C12 here. I want my guitar cabinet set up here. I want a drum screen set up here. They would make all those requests. So in general, through the entirety of the work at EMI, it was that sort of information was well documented. Now, when you get into a session and you're recording, then some of that goes out the window. If you're well set up, you don't need to change much. But if you're following your muse, and let's say I thought when I started this that I wanted to record the Steinway grand piano, but now that I'm into it, I want to use that Challen tack piano on the track, and the Challen's not set up. What do? Well, you grab a microphone and you throw it in front of the Challen. Yeah. And typically, in the case of the Beatles, that was an AKG D19C, just kind of a workhorse dynamic microphone. It would just get, it was plugged in, it's available. You grab it and you throw it in front of the sound source and you record it. So that's how things go. In general, we know from the tape logs that Barrett generated, notes on the tape boxes themselves, recording sheets that Lewison had access to and did some documentation of. We know a lot of what went into the majority of the Beatles sessions up through Let It Be. And where it starts to fall apart is whenever they were at another studio, there was going to be a different method that studio used, either to count tracks or count takes, or just the simplest thing. And that what started to happen in those cases more reflects modern recording, where you're lucky if you get on a modern multi-track, you open up the box, of 2-inch tape, and there's a track sheet that just says, bass, drums, guitar. That's all, that's all you get. In the boutique studios that they use, Trident and Olympic, that was more the case. Like everything coming out of Trident, if it was a finished take, that was take 1.
Okay. So it may not have been take 1. It could have just been...
It's probably take 40
yeah.
for the Beatles. But that was the one that they were working on. That's take 1 now in the Trident vernacular. Whereas in EMI, they were counting everything. That's take 40 on reel 3. And they would slate things on, they would slate the performances. There was a talk back that the engineers at EMI, they would, you'll hear it on a number of the bootlegs out there where you'll hear Norman Smith's voice or someone's voice come on and go, she's a woman, take 3.
Yeah.
Or you'll hear, this is Strawberry Fields Forever, RS3. And then the song starts. They'd slate them. So you'd know where they are, which is great for reconstructing history.
I was about to say the exact same thing. I mean, how lucky are we that EMI's referencing was so meticulous?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the exception to the rule. It's not the rule. It's the exception. And mercifully they did for the greatest pop band ever, right?
Yeah, it's the amount of serendipitous things that happened throughout the Beatles' career, and as sort of, as we find out more and more and more about them, it astounds me. I absolutely love it. It's so interesting.
No, it is. It's endlessly interesting, and I'm still, to this day, whenever I'm back listening to the recordings, I'm back listening to the mixes and that. There's always something new to hear. There's always a new way to open your ears to something that they were doing and to learn from, which I love too. I love what I can learn as a producer and as an engineer from the Beatles to this day. I just think there's really powerful lessons from vintage recording that I hope are not lost in the perceived ease of the digital age.
I hope that the conversations that the people I'm conversing with, they're going to hopefully be something to challenge what you've just said. I want, I've grown up in an era where it's really easy to do certain things, and I want to challenge that, because I've realized that there's a different way, and it's a beautiful way. So hopefully this is the antidote to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I'm certainly not a troglodyte. I work completely in the box, and have done that for a number of years, and I'm grateful for it. I'm so grateful for it. I have, access here in Toronto to, a lot of vintage gear and setups and kind of spoiled for choice. Most of the time I'm like probably the majority of, of modern, engineers and producers, I'm working in a computer. I'm working with a little SSL 2+ IO most of the time. That's all I need.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think you need to do things the most difficult way possible to get a good result. I think it's what I think the biggest difference between vintage recording and modern recording is, it comes in the intentionality of the artist. In that, before I put anything down, I know what I'm going for. I have a picture in my head. I'm not just recording stuff and in the mix I'm going to see what pasta ended up sticking to the wall. I go into my work, into my song, into my session with an idea of what I want to hear. I've got a vision for the song, and my work is only meant to bring that vision to life. They had to do it in back in the day. They had to do it that way. They had to have a plan for the session. You'll find that actually when the Beatles were without Martin, when they were kind of on their own and they didn't have the experience of being producers, that that's when you start getting 110 takes of Not Guilty. Just come on, not required.
Yeah.
And it's really because they went in and all they knew about that was they were going to record a song, and there wasn't this clear this clear vision of what was going to happen with it. Even when on like Pepper, when Lennon would give Martin this nebulous instruction of I want to smell the sawdust for the benefit of Mr. Kite. That's still a direction.
Yes.
That's still a concept. That's still something now to accomplish. Is okay. Well, how do I smell the sawdust? And for Martin, it was like, okay, sawdust. It's a circus. This is So what's in a circus? Oh, we've got it started with a calliope. And they were thinking about actually using a calliope, which, if anybody knows what a real calliope is, it's the size of a pickup truck and weighs about 2,000 pounds, and can be heard 10 10 city blocks away. It was meant to attract attention to the circus. You're not putting that in a recording studio. No. So they faked it, but the idea was there. Like, how do we bring that calliope feel and that? That sort of, again, that the intention of the picture that you want to paint when you're making your music, it had to be there, and you had to have thought out pretty much in advance of what you want to get done before you went into a session, because it was expensive. You had limited time. You were always on even in the Beatles case, and people think, oh, they could do whatever they wanted. Well, yeah, except that they had a contract that said that they were going to deliver 2 albums a year up through Pepper.
Yes.
And 4 sides, 2 singles with 2 B-sides. So, for the Beatles, that meant an average album, 14 tracks. That meant that over the course of a year, with everything else they had going on, that they were making 28 album cuts and 4 additional sides. So any one year they had to finish 32 songs. So think about that,
staggering.
Modern recording artists, that have a problem getting out a full album's worth of work in 5 years anymore.
Yeah. With respect to what we've just been discussing, did you have a favorite era that you enjoyed researching more than the others?
Well, the challenge when you get into the modern, their late era, the challenge there was a great one. It was a big mountain to climb. Sorting out the work, especially of the White Album, was really difficult. And coming out the other end of that made me very happy. Abbey Road Abbey Road had a lot of mystery around it. The 50th anniversary and some of the notes that Kevin Howlett put out with the deluxe edition helped me understand that a lot better as well. That, getting some of the mystery, or a lot of the mystery out of Abbey Road was also very satisfying. But, I'm like a lot of Beatles fans. I go back and forth. I mean, I get super excited by their early work just for how raw and immediate and wonderful it is. And, and then I get into Abbey Road and I hear an isolation of Billy Preston's organ work, and I just, inadvertently start drooling all over myself. So, yeah, but as far as the writing goes, I think, great challenges are always a wonderful thing to have. It's so the later era recordings, the Pepper on out, sorting those things out, making sense of them, and being able to explain that in a way that people can understand. I've enjoyed that a lot.
I like that. Because my next question was going to be, what's your most challenging? But in a way, you've answered them both at once, because it's been the most satisfying and potentially the most challenging all at the same time.
Yeah. The late recordings, sorting out, especially again as they moved to 8-track, because with the 8-track, because you can do what are called internal bounce downs, meaning I don't have to change the reel. I've got 8 tracks of audio. Let's say I've filled up 6 of them, and I know that I've got 3 more parts I want to record, so I'm going to run out of tape. Now in those 2 open tracks that I've got, I can reduce some performances. But EMI engineers never noted internal bounce downs.
Okay.
Right? So those in particular were a big challenge to sort out. Of if you got to point X on the recording, and I know that this other work was added, after point X. And now, what am I hearing, and how did those reductions come together to allow that? Like if you've got, again on an 8-track tape, but I've got four, four distinct backing vocal parts that I can hear, right? Or three distinct guitar parts that I can hear. And no one's told me that they changed, and I know from the tape logs that it's the same tape. Well, now I know that there was a tape reduction. So that helps me sort out and if that, and it also tells me what order that it happened to understand those. Because there's only, again, if you've ever worked on tape and had to deal with these challenges, there ends up only being typically one or at most two ways that you can engineer a recording in order to get to the result that you hear in your headphones. So, mercifully, with a lifetime of recording engineering and producing under my belt, I'm able to pick out signals, and I'm able to follow the bass track. I'm able to follow a violin. I'm able to follow a cello or a lead guitar or a rhythm guitar through an entire song. I can just hear. I can get myself to hear just those frequencies and now follow where it goes. And when you hear them and you know that they are in point X in the session, then it tells you the way that was recorded. The other thing that you'll know if you ever worked on analog technologies and worked on tape is that the way that you use tape is different than the way you use digital. You don't need a discrete channel for everything. You just need space on the tape. So the channel that holds the lead vocal, if the lead vocal doesn't overlap with the guitar solo, I'm using that channel for the guitar solo. I'm using that same track for the guitar solo. If the guitar solo track is on its own and it's only playing in three places, I'm going to put percussion on that. And so, all of those kind of understandings of how you record to tape and record with limited tracks informed the way that I sorted out how the Beatles fit everything onto an 8-track or a 4-track or whatever it happened to be.
Was there any particular standout sort of surprises that you unearthed that were a surprise, perhaps not to, well, just to you mainly? Was there anything that you can think of that was oh right, wow?
Yeah, the biggest one for me was that Clapton played his solo work on "While My Guitar Gently Weeps" as part of the backing track.
Wow. Okay, that's really special, isn't it?
That blew my mind because when you read the history of it, and I talked to Ken Scott about this, and Ken Scott didn't remember that.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So I had tried to figure out, because the solo's got ADT on it, but it was recorded to 8-track, and the 8-track at the time didn't have ADT. It wasn't available. Mm-hmm. So there's only a couple of technical ways that you could get artificial double tracking onto the signal. And I went over these scenarios with Ken Scott, and I was like, so I think that, it happened X way. And he looked at my rationale and he's like, yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about the way it happened. Well, then, the 50th anniversary comes out, and we get Howlett's, breakdown, and we get to hear Clapton's playing the backing track. He's doing those solos on the backing track, which made, actually, and right there when that, that was a big whoa moment for me. But the other thing that it reinforced was what I've always maintained, and we talked about it earlier here in our discussion, was you never do this work the most difficult way possible. You always do this work the easiest way possible. We were talking about in relation to percussion. Why would I do 3 passes on percussion if I've got 3 guys that can play percussion? I'll do 1 pass and get 3 guys to play percussion. If I've got Clapton in the studio, who is, a great live player, why wouldn't I have him solo on the backing track? Why would I wait and have him solo later? We get in our heads I think as especially modern, people that grew up as modern engineers or modern producers, you compartmentalize all this stuff. But the reality is again, they were just trying to get this work done. Clapton's in the studio. He's here to play. Let's play. Billy Preston's here. Let's play. Not, okay, we're going to do this backing track, and Billy, you just go to the canteen and we'll see you in a couple hours, and then we will stand over you while you do your organ solo. No. That's not the way that they made music. They made it the easiest way possible. So that's always the way to think about these recordings that we love, these early recordings that we love, was these guys were never these were pros. From the engineering staff out to the musician, these guys were pros, and pro musicians, pro engineers, pro producers. They do things the easiest way possible to get the result that they want. Because if they're not doing that, they're either not delivering on time or they're losing money. And it was the same case with the Beatles. So I try to carry that forward today. Whenever I'm facing an engineering problem, I'm facing or working with an artist, is what's the easiest way to get this done? Not what's the most difficult or or how do I use that synthesizer on this track? It's like, no, if throwing the piano through a microphone through a phase shifter will do it, I'm not going to spend an hour dialing up that same sound on a modular synthesizer.
No, I hear you.
Not going to do it.
No. So, what takeaways, perhaps in your own engineering or for what it offers other people who are working in the industry, what's changed for you as a result of doing this in respect to the way that you record?
Keep it simple, keep it immediate. Do look for the easy solution. Start with the easy solution. Recording's complicated enough. You don't need to you don't need to impose complication upon it. It's difficult enough as it is. So always look for the easy way to get what you want. That's one huge takeaway. The other is always work with intention. Always before you start recording on a song, before you start working on a song, know what you want it to sound like. Have a vision. I think the third lesson from the Beatles is be prepared. And in the Beatles' case, that meant be well rehearsed. You should know the only time you can really be free with any sort of music and any sort of work like this is that you know it backwards and forwards. And I think of it in terms of classical music, though I'm not a trained musician in any way. Everything I learned, I just learned to play from when I was a kid. So I don't have any classical background at all. But think of a conductor being able to say, "We're going to pick up at bar 34." Right? Yeah. You want to be able to do that with your own song. You want to be able to say, second chorus, third verse, and know what you play there. You need to your third stanza, second chorus. You're gonna third verse. Know your music that well, because if it's that ingrained in you, you've played through it enough that it's second nature to you. That's when you can really take it to another place, and that's usually a really cool place. So, I mean, those are the things that I take out of it, is stuff that sounds spontaneous from the Beatles. It sounds spontaneous because they just know it so well.
Yeah.
It's not that they haven't practiced it. It's because they know it so well. They know it so well because they have practiced it over and over and over again. And I encourage you, if you can get your hands on the Niagara reels out there, to take a listen to I don't encourage you to listen to all 80 CDs worth of it or whatever it is. But I do encourage you even if there's just a website that gives you a listing of it, and take a look, and you'll again see what I mentioned earlier, where any one day at Twickenham, they might play The Long and Winding Road 35 times. Maxwell's Silver Hammer. I can tell you why that might have broken up the band. It's 2 days of 45 takes of Maxwell's Silver Hammer. I'm leaving the Beatles after that.
Yeah, that's madness. So, just as we wrap up, when's the book out? Presumably, it's got a different release date in the US to in the UK.
No, it'll be out the same time worldwide.
Okay.
Looking for the second or third week of November, if all goes well. So available for the holidays and for your holiday shopping pleasure.
Well, I can't wait for it. Your contribution to sort of Beatles knowledge is really unbelievable, and it's something that I'm sure you are, and you should be enormously proud of.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that. Just trying to do work that matters, and hopefully it helps people appreciate and enjoy the music, a little bit more. It's done it for me, I just love this music. I think you can't know enough about how great music was put together. I have the same curiosity about a lot of great classic recordings. It's just mercifully I started with the Beatles, so I can make a living doing it.
I've got one final question. So in your opinion, is George playing the Rocky Strat or the Telly on the Let It Be solo?
Oh, that's a great question. There's bootleg film of him playing Rocky, showing him playing Rocky, working on it as an overdub, and that solo was overdubbed. So I'm actually very inclined to Rocky. I think Rocky shows up. We all just think of Rocky in the time capsule of even though Rocky came into the world with help with the help recordings with that era. We think of it because of Magical Mystery Tour. We think of it just like that was the Magical Mystery Tour guitar, but he played it through the entire balance of their career. That Strat was always there. So Let It Be solo, I'm really lean toward Rocky.
I agree with you. I think it sounds like a Strat to me, to my ears.
Yeah. Now this is something I'm very careful with, because I'll have people come up with me and be like, "You're crazy that was a Tennessean man. That was easily the country gentleman. I mean, the difference between a humbucker and a single coil is just like you can't tell the difference." I always say, okay, humbucker through this amp dialed this way versus single coil through this amp dialed this way, and we knew all of those were available, and now you're going to tell me what guitar it was? No, you're not.
Yeah. I love it. All right, I'll eat my words. Thank you so much for speaking to me, Jerry. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed this.
I've enjoyed it too, Joe. Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity.
And there we go. I really do hope that you enjoyed that conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Jerry's such a wonderful guy, and he's done such a wonderful thing archiving the Beatles recording in the way that he has done. I strongly urge you to go to Amazon, which is what Jerry links to on his website. So he doesn't seem to mind Amazon taking their cut. I strongly urge you to go and buy the book. They range from sort of £25 to £30, which I think is what the new one is. I'm not sure what that equates to in dollars at the moment, but they are fantastic resources. So if you're at all interested in Beatles recording and some of those technical details, do go and check out that series of books. There's 5 in total. I have a couple of them, and they are fantastic, and I'm slowly going to add to my collection. Okay, so I'm very, very, very excited that the next episode I have is an interview with Malcolm Toft, who was the first recording engineer, or I think they may have even called it balance engineer, at Trident Studios back in the 60s. He just has a lust for life and a lust for recording. He is one of the sharpest minds, and he's incredible. So obviously he went on to build some consoles, mixing consoles that are world renowned. The Trident consoles are all designed by by Malcolm, and he's also got a whole host of other gear that he's designed. There's a new thing he's got out at the moment called Basics, which is a bass preamplifier that Pino Palladino is using. He also has designed 500 series equipment, a 19-inch rack equipment, mixing desks, smaller mixing desks, portable mixing desks. I mean, I can't believe how much stuff he's managed to do. So he talks through his career and how he went from being interested in audio and electronics to being one of the world's most renowned console builders. Some of the artists that he's worked with. He also discusses a new course that he's got out, which gives advice on how to record, essentially. It's an amazing resource, and it's very, very, very well priced. I will tell you more about that next episode, but it's really, really, really exciting, and I absolutely can't wait to share it with you. So that just leaves me to say, if you'd like to get in touch with me, you can do that at joe@allyouneedisdrums.com. My website is allyouneedisdrums.com. You can message me there about my bespoke recording for your songs, drum recording that is. There's also an archive of lots of Beatles songs that I've re-recorded on drums to click that you can use however you see fit. Chop them up for songwriting or do whatever you want to do. There is also some transcriptions on there of the Beatles songs that I have so far recorded. I'm slowly working my way through the whole back catalogue. Of the studio recordings, that is, and maybe one day I'll get onto some other bits and bobs like the live sessions. So yeah, you can do all that, and please do get in touch. I really do love hearing from you, and I love getting your suggestions. Okay, so I just want to say a big thank you to Joe Kane, who put together the intro and outro music for me. I really ought to get some transition music as well. That's something that's on my agenda to sort out. I'm going to speak to Joe. So if you're listening to this, I'm going to speak to you. And I also want to thank David Henshaw for putting together the beautiful artwork that he does for me every 2 weeks. So I will see you in a fortnight's time for my conversation with Malcolm Toft. Okie dokie, have a good one. Goodbye.